Good evening, everyone. Thank you for making it to the Publicity Webinar for DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance Senior and Intermediate Fellowship Competition. I am Dr. Archie Datta, and I am a grants advisor with India Alliance, and I'll be your host for the evening. So the purpose of this webinar is basically to familiarize prospective applicants and aspirants about the application process. We have with us today two of our fellows, Dr. Varsha Singh from IISc Bangalore and Dr. Lipi Tukran from IGIB Delhi, who will talk about how the fellowship has helped them in their career and about their experience with the application processes. We also have our esteemed committee member, Professor Varun Chanda, who will tell us what reviewers look for in an application. We also have my colleagues, Dr. Rajeshri Sanyal, who is a grants advisor with India Alliance, joining us today as a resource person. And I also have Dr. Somiya Kantikosh as my colleague, who is also a grants advisor with India Alliance. So without any further delay, I would start the webinar. However, before I start, let me have some housekeeping announcements. And all attendees will be muted throughout the webinar. At the end of the webinar, we will have a question answer session. So if any one of you have a question, please click the hand icon and we would unmute you so that you can speak and ask your question. And if by any chance, due to any technical difficulties, you exit the webinar, please join back the webinar with the same link. So with this, I would start the webinar, but I would also, we also would have our senior grants advisor, Dr. Madhavan Chalat from India Alliance, joining us in some time. So our first speaker of the day is Dr. Somiya Kantikosh. As I said, he is a grants advisor with India Alliance. He has a PhD in infection immunology with experience in bioinformatics. He is passionate about children education and had worked as a faculty with Teach for India. So he will basically take you through an overview of the senior and intermediate fellowship competition. So I would hand it over to Somiya.
India Alliance touches two primary research areas through its fellowship schemes. First is basic biomedical research, which is under focus since the inception of India Alliance, and second is clinical and public health research, which got introduced in the year 2013. There are three types of fellowships under each scheme. First, for launching of the post-PhD career of a researcher, we have early career fellowships, which provide generous personal support as well as funds for research consumables and equipment, along with opportunity to perform collaborative research within India and abroad. For researchers with excellent track record and experience as independent researcher, we have intermediate fellowship, which too provides generous personal support, funds for research, and promotes collaborative work within India and abroad. For the well-established researchers who have made their mark in their respective area of research and are looking forward to strengthening their leadership in the scientific community in India, we have senior fellowship. What makes India Alliance fellowships one of the most coveted fellowships in India are its salient features. All our fellowships come along with flexible and generous funding, and we give due regard to non-research career breaks, and the eligibility is calculated only considering the post-PhD active research experience. Applicants are not required to have a salaried position at the host institute or any commitment for the same from the host institute. None of our fellowships have age or nationality restrictions. Researchers with any nationality can apply, provided their place of work during the fellowship should be within India. Their focus is on establishing a researcher as an independent or lead investigator. We encourage interdisciplinary research, and therefore our fellowships promote national and international collaborations with experts across the globe. At the application round, Applicants are provided with continued feedback and support. The applications are reviewed by international peer review, and the whole process of the application is carried out in an online, secure, and user-friendly application process platform called as ISIS. Regarding eligibility criteria under Senior and Intermediate Fellowship Scheme, we call for applications for Senior and Intermediate Fellowship under Basic Biomedical Scheme twice in a year, and today we are here for the round 1 of the fellowship for the year 2023. An applicant with 4 to 15 years post-PhD active research experience is eligible to apply for the Intermediate or Senior Fellowship. The post-PhD experience is calculated from the date of PhD viva, and as mentioned earlier, the eligibility calculation is done excluding the non-research career break of the applicant. The non-research career break needs to be supported by a strong justification from the applicant. Applicant can have their PhD degree from any discipline of science. The proposed research should fall within the India Alliance remit, which is to support biomedical research that is relevant to human and animal welfare. Applicants will have to complete his or her fellowship at any not-for-profit institution within India. Now, coming to the key provisions, both intermediate and senior fellowships are for the duration of 5 years. The total budget cap for intermediate fellowship is 3.6 crores Indian rupees, and for senior fellowship it is 4.5 crores Indian rupee. Personal support for the intermediate fellows are up to 13.8 lakhs Indian rupee, and for senior fellowship it is up to 16.1 lakhs Indian rupees. Applicants without any salary support from host institute will be provided with complete personal support value. Those with salary support from host institute will be provided with a top-up only if their annual salary is below the cap mentioned by India Alliance. Major equipment can be requested by applicants under both the fellowships. An intermediate applicant can request for up to 2 support staffs, whereas for senior fellowship, request can be made up to 4 support staffs. And both intermediate fellowship applicant and senior fellowship applicant are eligible to use support staff for postdoctoral positions also. Work outside host institute or WOHI is an interesting opportunity which can be availed by the intermediate fellowship applicants to work outside their host institute within India or abroad up to a duration of 12 months. To support our fellows, India Alliance provide overseas subsistence allowance of $3,000 per month and a consolidated amount of 1.5 lakhs Indian rupee for the overseas travel. A separate travel to meeting allowance is also allocated by India Alliance. A fixed value of 7.5 lakhs Indian rupee is provided to the intermediate fellows, and a sum of 10 lakhs Indian rupee is provided to senior fellows. Similarly, a flexible funding allowance or contingency of total sum of 7.5 lakhs Indian rupee is provided to an intermediate fellow, and a sum of 10 lakhs Indian rupee is allocated to senior fellows. We at India Alliance are mindful of our other responsibilities our fellows share at their host institute, and therefore we expect time commitment of at least 80% for India Alliance project research from intermediate fellows and 70% from senior fellows. We expect from our intermediate and senior fellows to take not more than 8 hours per week non-research activity duties. The fellowship application cycle is broadly divided into 2 parts. First is preliminary application round, and second is full application round. The first step in the cycle is preliminary application, where first round of screening is done to invite the most competitive applicants from that cohort to submit a full application. At this stage, the invitees are also reminded of the resubmission policy of India Alliance, where an application, if gets rejected at the shortlisting stage, will not be able to apply for the similar scheme or any junior scheme. The full applications undergo rigorous international peer review and further reviewed by the selection committee, and based on which a few of them are shortlisted for interview rounds. At this stage, an applicant is informed about the dual fellowship policy of India Alliance, where, if awarded following interview, an India Alliance fellowship awardee cannot hold other fellowship for the project duration of 5 years. The awardee will have to relinquish any other fellowship held or awarded to them, but this policy does not apply on grants. The whole application cycle takes an approximate period of 10 months to complete. During the preliminary application, there are few mandatory roles which are essential to be mentioned, such as lead applicant details are mandatory, and at least one letter of recommendation from a supervisor, who can be your PhD supervisor, postdoc supervisor, or any collaborator, previous collaborative supervisor, and the letter of recommendation is essential at the preliminary stage. Sponsor details are mandatory, although letter of support from the sponsor is not mandatory at the preliminary application round. Role for mentor is not mandatory at the preliminary application round. In the full application round, along with the previously mentioned roles at preliminary stage, letter of recommendations from sponsor is mandatory. Role of mentor and the letter of support is only mandatory for intermediate, but it is not mandatory for senior applicants. External sponsor for work outside host institute or WOHI and the letter of recommendation is required only if an intermediate applicant has requested for WOHI. For senior applicants, it is not applicable. Roles for collaborators, applicants have the provision to add collaborator in the application. Collaborators are the individuals who will supply reagents, assist in specific protocols, provide resource services, etc. However, it is not mandatory to submit letter of support from the collaborator at the preliminary stage, but it is necessary only if invited for full application. The preliminary application comprises of following critical sections which need to be filled out. Applicant CV. It is highly advisable to fill the applicant CV completely from pre-PhD to the recent details. Prospective applicants are also requested to fill their complete publication details in the format prescribed by India Alliance. Next is summary of proposed research. Prospective applicants are requested to keep their proposal summary within 750 words limit. It is a good idea to mention the problem applicant is targeting, approach to solve the problem, objectives, methods to be used, and expected outcome. Other than them, details of host institute is critical, details of sponsor, and at least one letter of recommendation from supervisor. Other than the above mentioned mandatory details, the full application requires other crucial details. First is full research proposal. That is, the word limit for the intermediate fellowship is 3,500 words, and for senior fellowship is 5,000 words. Budget and elaborate information on support staff, material, consumable, equipment, animal related details, and others will be requested, and it is advisable to be very careful while filling them and keeping the total budget within the cap value prescribed under each fellowship scheme. The next comes is the letter of support from mentor, letter of support from external sponsor if the role is added to the application to avail work outside host institute, letter of support from collaborators, and details of human or animal experiments. Now, The essential deadlines which are to be remembered for the coming Senior and Intermediate Fellowship 2023 Round 1 application cycle are: preliminary application will be open for submissions from 1st of July 2022. The preliminary application submission deadline will be 28th July 2022 at 2 p.m. Indian Standard Time. The full application submission deadline would be tentatively around October 2022. Interview will be conducted around in the month of May or June in the year 2023, and if awarded, then the fellowship start date would be 1st of January 2024. As mentioned earlier, the application submission for India Alliance Fellowship programs takes place on an online secured user-friendly platform called ISS. Once the application call opens, the prospective applicants are requested to create their own ISS profile. For entering applicant details, please click on Manage My Details located on the right-hand side of the home page. It is advisable to complete filling up of the mentioned section ahead of starting an application, as applicant's detail will be mapped from the Manage My Details. To start an application, click on My Application, which is also located on the right-hand side of the home page. After entering My Application page, prospective applicants may click on the New Application to select the suitable application round and create their own application form. Please read the introduction section of the application form very carefully to note the critical points to be kept in mind while filling up the preliminary application. All the sections of the application will be available on the right-hand side of the application page. It is advisable to read the instructions carefully in each section to reduce any unnecessary errors. With this, we come to the end of the presentation. For any further query regarding the application for Senior and Intermediate Fellowship 2023 Round 1, please collate all your queries and send to us at info@indiaalliance.org and give us 3 to 5 business days to respond to your queries. Please also visit our website www.indiaalliance.org for more information. Detailed information regarding each scheme remit eligibility application process are available under Applicants Corner section in our website. Again, I would like to remind you all the deadline to submit the preliminary application is 28 July 2022, 2 p.m. Indian Standard Time.
Thank you, Somiya, for that overview about the scheme for Senior and Intermediate Fellowship competition. We would now move on to our next speaker of the day. She's Dr. Varsha Singh. She joined IISc as an assistant professor in 2012 and currently she is an associate professor with Indian Institute of Sciences, Bengaluru. She uses C. elegans as a model host organism to understand how the nervous system regulates lifespan. She also works on behavioral aspect of host-pathogen interaction. She is an Indian Alliance Senior Fellow and had been also an Intermediate Fellow with us. Her association with India Alliance has been since the beginning of her career in India as a faculty. She will take you through her journey, how India Alliance Fellowship has helped her career. She had sent us a video recording and which we will be playing shortly. However, she has been kind enough to be a part of the webinar today as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Varsha Singh and like all of you, I'm also a researcher. And I'm speaking to you from a really lovely campus of Indian Institute of Science and this is in the city of Bangalore.
Varsha's video.
Institute of Science and this is in the.
Can anyone confirm with me if the audio is working or not?
I can hear.
This is in the city of Bangalore. So if you haven't visited IISc, please consider visiting. And if you haven't found a job yet, think about applying to Department of MRDG at IISc. So today I have the pleasure to talk to you about my journey of 9+ years as a faculty in India, and also how my research is shaped by the funding from Wellcome Trust, DBT, India Alliance, and many of you are probably haven't started your lab in India yet. And I was in this position about 10 years ago. I was winding up my postdoc at Duke University Medical Center. We have done really some fundamental research understanding post-microbe interactions there. And I had also figured out that I was going to have my own lab and do some fundamental research, because I believed, and I still believe, that C. elegans nematode is a great model to uncover unknown facets of innate immunity. So the trouble was, I was being told by several people in the States and some people that in India whom I was in touch with, that funding for basic research, for example in C. elegans, was not easy to come by, or it would be very small quantum of money. And this was the time when I was invited to Boston to attend a young investigator meeting called YIM. And I went there, and this was a really fantastic meeting because I met lots of other postdocs in the same position that I was in. But I also met representatives, that meant professors from various institutions in India who wanted to hire us. For example, people from IITs, ICERs, IISc, INSTEM, and so on. And it was a great experience. We could explain our research. They would tell us who they wanted to recruit. There were invitations shared. And one of the things that all of them told each one of us was that there was a new funding scheme by Wellcome Trust, DBT, Equal Partnership, who would fund fundamental research or basic research which had the potential either directly or indirectly to feed into our understanding of human health. So that means this was biomedical research or relevance for biomedical research. And this sounded really exciting. And one of the people whom I knew in masters, she was now a faculty in Hyderabad, and she had just received this funding. So this seemed like a very good opportunity, and it really got many of us over there to apply to various institutions in India, and many of them did end up getting intermediate fellowship from India Alliance or Wellcome DBT, and I will keep switching between these two. So many of the people that I've met at EM in Boston, we have become friends because we meet off and on at the fellows meeting or elsewhere at various conferences in India. And it's really nice. So now I would like to tell you about a little bit about application process, because I've gone through intermediate fellowship, and more recently I also applied for senior fellowship, and I am really fortunate that it worked out for me both the times. So the fellowship works in a very straightforward manner. If you visit the Alliance website, they'll tell you the timeline for various steps in the application process. But it typically begins with submission of a preliminary proposal of approximately 750 words. And this is a great opportunity to put together your ideas. And in the form of providing a background, describing the lacunae in the field of your interest. And once you have defined a lacuna, it allows you to pose a question that only you or few people have the ability to address, right? So this is your time to step in and then say, look, here is my expertise. Here is a model system, and here is how I'm going to uncover something which has not been done, and that will potentially be of interest, not just to what I'm talking about, but will have a wider impact of understanding a process at the molecular, cellular, tissue, or organismal level, and it will vary on the question of your interest. So I was doing this while I was packing my bags in Durham to come to India. I submitted my preliminary proposal, and while I arrived in Bangalore and looking for places to live, a few weeks later I got a really lovely email from Alliance saying that they liked my preliminary proposal and they wanted me to submit a full proposal. So the full proposal is really nice because it gives you a lot more room to expand upon your ideas. So depending upon the scheme that you're applying for, you can have 3,500 words or 5,000 words for your proposal, and you will have additional space to provide supporting information. And you should use every inch, centimeter, and millimeter of it to provide interesting data from yourself and from other places to see why your idea is fundable. So the way I structure my preliminary proposal as well as my full proposal both time was to organize in the format where the title was very crisp, informative, and engaging. It told people what the model was and what the question was and why it was relevant. So you go through iterations and figure out which one works best for you and might work best for a diverse community who may be looking at it. So then you divide the rest of your proposal into a very strong background section. And this in my mind is the most important part of your proposal. Because this is the space where you say, hey, this is the field which is of relevance to either animal health or human health, and here is a bit, and here is what we don't know about it. So, for example, if you talk about a disease, you want to then say that although this disease affects so many people, here is a process that we do not understand, and here is one way how we could do this. So, for example, I talked about how smells are very important for us to decide how much humans eat, their diet habits, their metabolism, and so on. And then I also talked about how smells are coming from not just from food, but also from bacteria which are present in our gut, in our lungs, in our armpits, behind our ears, and so on. And then I went on to describe evidence from various different organisms to show that these smells are not just for our nose, but the receptors for such smells exist in our lungs, in our colon, in our kidneys, and so on. And they have profound effect on our physiology. And so I drew a much bigger canvas talking about how smells are important for animal physiology. But then I went on to describe how we need to understand this process better, because smells can be delivered in a short duration of time and can become potential ways to manipulate health. But to understand how smells regulate physiology, we needed to have a model system, and that's where I brought in C. elegans as a genetically, behaviorally, and optically tractable model system to study that. And so what you basically need to provide is the reason why the model and hypothesis that you are describing works, and how you are one of the best people to do it. So it should match your expertise and skill set and your know-how for the system. So once you're done with the background and the lacunae, an interesting question worth studying and a hypothesis, you begin to describe your approach for testing your hypothesis, and this allows you to now describe your ways of investigation under specific aims or objectives, and these have to be really carefully planned because you in each aim you can subdivide into sub aims, and each sub aim should have sufficient information, and that information should be enough of methodology or technical details, but not too much. But two other components which become essentially very important is to say what is the expected outcome and also what are the potential pitfalls. So if there are ways that things can go wrong or that may not work, and if that's a possibility, you have to provide alternative strategy. If plan A fails, what is my plan B? What is my plan C? So if you can divide all three of your aims into specific sub-aims, which have these three sections, details of methodology, of expected outcome, and potential pitfalls versus way to fix them, then you're good to go. So what you want to end with is possibly a section on relevance. So the remit of India Alliance is for biomedical research. So this is where, even if you're working with a model system, you bring it back and then say how the outcomes of your studies are going to instruct, inform, or uncover basic principles which might also operate in humans and larger animals, and so on. All this works if you also combine your proposal with a graphical summary or an image which describes all the elements that I've just spoke about. So it should have all three of your aims and sub-aims and how they are interconnected. And they should be able to see really bigger technical details in this graphical summary. So the reviewers who are looking at your proposal will be able to see that what they have understood by reading at the text is also represented in the figure. And it possibly bolster their confidence in your proposal. It also lets them know that you can visualize your proposal and how it will work out in space and time. So while you're doing all this, what is also important is that you have all the statements that you make or major statements that you make throughout your proposal are supported by references. And these references should obviously be, some of these would be from your own publications, but it's equally important that you refer to work by other people in the field, anywhere in the world. So it's important to give credit where credit is due. So that's really interesting. So when you submit this proposal, and hopefully all of you will be doing that, you will have to wait for a while, but after a few months, Alliance will get back to you with another email, and they will tell you that now you are invited from an interview. And you should really, really feel happy, because this is the time where you get to talk to people in the committee, and you should really feel great about it. So you only get an invitation for an interview after your proposal has been critically evaluated and seen by 4 to 6 experts in the field who could be anywhere in the world. And then they call you for an interview, and the interview is one of the best things that I have experienced, because it's 30 minutes of just pure bliss, pure science, that you get to discuss with a committee who is very well read, have seen much bigger canvases of science, and their perspective is different from yours, but they ask very interesting questions, and that you enjoy answering. So the way this goes is that you have 5 minutes to present your ideas. So those 3,500 words have to fit in 5 data slides. So the same sub-aims have to be, same background, same aims have to be presented in a very engaging, colorful manner. And then there'll be 25 minutes of question and answers. Two of the people from the committee who would have thoroughly read your proposal and comments from the reviewer will be asking most of the questions. And most of them you will realize are to do with expected outcomes. What happens if this doesn't work? Have you thought of an alternative strategy? How your proposal is relevant to human health? Does it fit into biomedical research? And so on. And before you realize it, those 30 minutes are up, and you would have realized this was one of the best scientific interactions of your life. So although I didn't practice for the interview the first time around for my intermediate fellowship, it went well. But now I tell people to do practice their presentation, and I think it's important to get feedback, not just from people from your community. So if I work with C. elegans, I don't take suggestions just from people who work with worms, but it's perhaps more important to get critiqued by people from outside your comfort zone, outside your field, because the committee is composed of people who are very well read, and they represent experts in microbiology, neurobiology, structural biology, cell biology, interdisciplinary sciences, materials, and so on. So you really want to be prepared to answer questions from all angles. And that's what you want to be prepared for. And there's so many ways getting funding from Alliance helps you. For example, I proposed something for intermediate fellowship, I got funded, but it generated know-how and a direction which I hadn't expected. It brought in new challenges, which really allowed me to propose senior fellowship, which was quite different from what I proposed for intermediate fellowship. It had more challenge, it had more innovation than I had in my intermediate fellowship. And I think that was something that the committee was perhaps looking for. So when you apply for intermediate fellowship, they are looking at what you have possibly done in the past, how good you were as a postdoc. But when you're applying for senior fellowship, they see how you have been as an independent PI, how you have been able to lead the field, and are the things that you're looking to your original ideas, how it can shape the rest of the community, and so on. So once you get the funding, it's so many things that you can do that you can't do with traditional small quantum of funding that many agencies in our country provide. It allows you to do some of the experiments that are not affordable, and so you have more time to think what experiments to do, how to investigate a question, than whether or not I can afford to do it. And that's liberating. It's really good for you, for students and postdocs in your group, and so on. Alliance Fellowship also comes with your ability to meet with other fellows. And this is a 3 days annual fellows meeting where you also get to meet members of the committee who would have previously interviewed you. And many of them become your mentors, your advisors. They give you advice about many things throughout your time as fellows and even later on. So there are so many reasons to try and get intermediate or senior fellowship from India Alliance. So I hope description of my journey was useful to some of you, and I hope all of you will apply, and I wish you all the best. I hope to see you in annual fellows meeting very soon. Good luck. Bye-bye.
So that was Varsha Singh for you, and we do have her with us on the webinar today. So on the question answer session, if anyone of you have any questions for her, you can always ask her. So we'll move on to our next speaker, who is Dr. Lipi Tukran. She is a principal investigator in the Computational Structure Biology Lab at CSR Institute of Genomic and Integration Biology. Her lab works on state-of-the-art high-performance computing to characterize dynamic behavior of biological macromolecules and characterize their interactions, focusing on mechanism by which proteins target specific membrane lipids. She's our India Alliance Intermediate Fellow. She will take you through her experience, how writing a research grant is like walking a tightrope, and connecting that with her recent experience. Over to you, Lipi.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. In this webinar mode, I'm trying to just share my slides. I have few slides to show. Hello, everyone. I'm going to present about my recent experiences in writing the intermediate fellowship, and also just introducing where I am, what has been my career trajectory, and also what we work on. I'm placed here in IGIB at South Campus, beautiful place where my lab, computational structural biology, is there. And the idea of our research is to find out more about autophagosome formation in the process called autophagy, which involves a lot of protein membrane interactions, and we look at it using contemporary computational methods. Largely this, but there also has been a detour in recent years where we had worked extensively in the area of COVID-19, the spike mutations, and yeah, this has been the recent thrust. And largely, if I have to put about what my lab works on, as I said, the first focus where I have written the proposal and consolidated our ideas in also the intermediate fellowship was molecular details of autophagosome formation. And we're very interested in mapping the genomic variations and how they alter the protein function. Also in general, interested in protein membrane dynamics of challenging systems that cannot be otherwise investigated using the experimental techniques. We are also very keen to apply the machine learning techniques in trying to predict large outcomes on the basis of structure. My career trajectory has been from here and there, but largely was a master's in bioinformatics, and then went on to do PhD in computational biophysics, did a short postdoc before I came in as an Inspire Fellowship, which is almost like a glorious postdoc. So I did my, you can say, postdoc in India, but it was like implementing my own ideas because it gives you own research grant. And this part also was interesting because I was aware of a research grant that is competitive at an early stage. Later, IGIB recruited me as an assistant professor, senior scientist in 2016, but then few years down the line, COVID happened, and also other things which delayed my application. So just recently, this round is what I would like to call season 2 of our lab. And with this, I would like to give some of the analogy to what I think would be interesting example. So what you see here are largely these tightrope walkers from 1861. So this has been doing out since centuries, and what they do is to display thrill for the audience, but many things are dependent on how to thrill the audience, and they focus on a lot of things. But needless to say, here I'm trying to connect these points to what we are going to speak for a few minutes next, which is the research proposal writing. And I've heard a lot of talks about, it's challenging and it's exciting, and it's kind of competitive. So, but I wanted to also convey details about how you could utilize some of these points in this analogous framework to understand. So basically, while you write the preliminary round, which is quite short, this is largely focused towards the bigger, the full proposal, and I hope you all go through that. And the ones that are selected would get a mail from India Alliance suggesting to write the full proposal. And there, for me, the objective is to convince the reviewers / committee of your future research performance. And if you keep that objective in mind, few things are very critical. Focusing on the right balance, because sometimes you may want to go into technical details, or you might want to explain hypothesis more. I think with the grant to be read by the best of the field, one needs to be focused on the right kind of balance. And to start early is what I would suggest. So start with building the initial framework, which is around 3 to 4 objectives. And as Varsha also mentioned, play around with also the sub-objectives and how you would like to say within sub-objectives, what would you like to give with its limitations and pitfalls. But again, focus on the right balance. Also, while you are writing these sub-objectives or sub-aims, make sure the question that you are addressing or framing is reflecting in all these sub-aims, and they have to be connected right from the beginning. So you could expand as you move on, but it has to be, the research question is to be at the center. What I mean by tool set is something which is very critical. I learned this during my research experience, that how you are or let's say how you're placed to write that proposal is also to be demonstrated there. So what has been your past experience, how your previous technical or scientific experience will shape the other future proposed experimental designs is, I think, key for the reviewer to understand that you are well placed in doing the work. And of course, literature is the key. How you utilize literature is very interesting to me in this proposal. So primarily in the manuscript writing, you would want to introduce various sections which are relevant to your area of work. But here, I think you can, I think Varsha pointed out, so I might be redundant here, that you really have to utilize to highlight the lacuna at many places, such that it becomes really the key is you, where the literature is unable to go beyond that question. So the question has to be highlighted using the literature early on. And then how are you placed in a unique way to address it? Because this is again an interesting element of the research proposal that I thought I'll share, that if you have interdisciplinary collaborators, or if your past experience has been interdisciplinary, and how you're bringing those skill set to solve that biological questions would be really interesting. So do incorporate collaborators, the nature, if you would, they in a way encourage that. So feel free to include collaborators of various kinds in terms where you are the key in doing the work, but if that allows you to incorporate an RNA-seq person or person who can help you in doing an X experiment, and that places you in a unique way to address it, so please do utilize that well. There's another key feature to the application process is the mentoring, the coach. And I think here the concept might be that if you can get away from your PhD supervisor, or the ones who have been supervising you for a long time, would be really nice. So this also involves a long-term collaboration, not really scientifically, but who you can go to, for example, for if you have a lot of ideas and you do not know if this work is fitting to an X journal, you can go and go for these advices. And this is really interesting. So feel free to write to people you have admired their work, to be the mentor in the institute that you are placed, or wherever you are applying, or anywhere else in India or abroad. But this, I think, is a very interesting feature, to be mentored on, let's say, in a formal framework. And during now, once you're through the whole framework, you know your objectives, you know the writing part. The next segment is important to do early, which is asking feedback. So if you can send your proposal and now ask for peers to review that or just give you the feedback, this gives you a lot of advantage in terms of knowing whether the reviewer X would or the committee X would also see what you are trying to convey. So please do have time in advance to share and do not do it at the last moment. And of course, once you receive the email for interview, it's quite ecstatic, and 5 minutes is what they share that you have to present. But I have to confess that those 5 minutes are not to give more information, but in fact, if you can just utilize less than 5 minutes, I think committee members would be even thankful to you, because then you would not look rushed. So you just take this opportunity of 5 minutes to present your work in as less points as possible. So for example, just initiate on the key introductory slide. So what is your model system and why do you think this model system is interesting based on the literature points? Moving on to your hypothesis, that this is very clear in your mind, and then from this hypothesis, the current understanding will be rapidly expanded because of the proposed work, which you will do in step 1, step 2, and step 3. And this is going to now include these experiments, and you have these following limitations and future design for the proposal. And I think it just end there. Just don't include too many details here. Like for example, I would just want to say very few things here, but if you can notice, even for the research proposal or towards the end, the presentation is the key, meaning that how would you like to present the data? If you're writing the proposal and if you have series of data points, can you organize your thoughts for the reader such that the data is presented, or rather the hypothesis or whichever stage you are in is presented well? So these bread slices could have also been arranged in a linear manner. But if you really see what has been done here is this, that you have from white to brown and white to brown here, but brown to black. And on the diagonal, you can directly go from white to black. And this for me is the key in terms of presentation of complex data. Do your own analysis, or do your orient the reader in what would you like to see the data points. And I have to emphasize, because I might come as someone who has not applied as a postdoc, but as an independent PI, which is also common. You have to consider that preliminary data is not really essential. But if you have preliminary data, and if you have certain data points, please do include it. And that's, as I said, not mandatory if you're fresh from your postdoc lab, but if you do have some data where you like to point out, you can also add that data as an appendix. So some of these figures which are not being accommodated in the large proposal, you could also give as the additional documents. So I think this is where I would like to just consolidate my thoughts, and I hope this was clear. My lab is now my happy place, and I'm very happy to be soon to be funded by Intermediate Alliance this year. And yeah, so a lot of folks right now are either going, so we'll have some changes soon, but this is an exciting place where I'm very happy to work. So I hope you all the best, and if there are any questions, we'll be happy to take them towards the end.
Thank you, Lipi. That was wonderful. Thank you for taking us through your journey and the tightrope that you have walked. So we would move on to our final speaker. We'll definitely get a chance to have your question answers with Lipi at the end of the sessions. So our final speaker today in the webinar is Professor Baron Chanda Professor Chanda is a principal investigator at Department of Anesthesiology, Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. His primary research interest is to understand the mechanism of electrical signaling proteins such as ion channels. He's our senior and intermediate committee member. He will take you through the expectations of the selection committee. Over to you, Professor Chanda.
Right. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you this morning or evening for you in India. What I thought I will do is share some of the perspective of that I have serving in this committee, and also give you what are some of the thoughts that we as committee members have when we see these proposals. So I'll start a little bit about how I started here in this ended up in this committee. So I actually graduated, did my PhD work in India at the National Center for Biological Sciences, and then I went to UCLA, and from there I went. Was for a year in University of Chicago, and from there I went to UW Madison, and finally I ended up in WashU. I joined this committee in 2020, and part of the reason for joining this committee was to also connect more with research in India. I haven't, since the time I left, I had not been able to connect with some of the stuff that is going on in India, and I thought that this would be a very interesting opportunity for me to know more about Indian the research that's going on in India, and also in some way to provide some way I can contribute to this process, the growth that's taking place, because there's a lot of exciting work that is going on in India. So let me just tell you what I have written out is the kind of things that we as a selection committee go through when we get this, receive the proposals on our end. So the proposals are sent out, as was mentioned before, to external reviewers who are experts in the field, in your field, whichever field you are in. And these are evaluated by, so we typically get anywhere between 4 to 6 reviewers to give us feedback. And then this feedback, we as a selection committee member get these reviews and your application. So we deviate up between the different members of the selection committee, and typically each of one of us reads about anywhere between 4 to 6 applications, and then we give our feedback on these. And so our feedback takes into account your proposal, your application, as well as the reviewer's feedback. And this gives a second level of control, because sometimes the reviewer's feedback, because it comes from reviewers who are all across the world, their levels are not really necessarily matched, and there are very different conflicting views or divergent views and opinions, and we try to synthesize that and kind of put things in perspective. And so this is actually something really interesting. I mean, I serve in grants committees and study sections in the United States. We don't have this process, but this, I think, helps balance out some of the inconsistencies which you might get when you have very different reviewers. And some of these reviewers may not have seen proposals come from I mean, they might be reviewing the grants for the first time for India Alliance, and they don't know what is the expectation levels and things like that. For instance, typically in United States, most proposals require significant preliminary data to support the feasibility, which is not really the case with proposals for intermediate fellowships. And so we have to kind of calibrate the expectations. And so you take that into account as a selection committee member and use that to provide a more reasonable and provide some sort of a feedback to the chairs of our committee to say that where this proposal stands. So once we provide that feedback, and provide a ranking of these proposals, that the chairs, usually two chair and the co-chair, take all of these into account, and then they, I think, select the first top. Then they make selection of how many candidates will be moving to the next round, which is the interview round. Okay, and so the interview round here is really your opportunity to shine, because this is again unique to India Alliance program, and again, being in United States, we don't have this sort of a process. Where what we do is we give a feedback, we have a meeting where we decide. At the meeting, we and then we do give a ranking to the proposals, and that's basically it. The interview here allows you, in some sense, to address some of the comments that the reviewers had made specifically, and what I have noticed and what I've done also personally is many of the selection committee members use some of the criticisms that come up in the reviews, or some of the critiques that come up in the reviews, and bring that up as a question. And this gives you as an applicant an opportunity to rebut some of these. So you want to show that you have thought carefully about your proposal, your project, which all of you have, and basically show off your knowledge. So this is really your chance, a moment for you to shine. And given that the proposal has a word limit, etc., you cannot put everything, you cannot go into all the details, and you have to you can use the interview to really provide some of that feedback. What I would also add here, just a couple more things. One is that I would like to use this opportunity to give you a sense of how the reviews are structured, so that you can think of, when you are thinking of the proposal, you also it's helpful for me when I write proposals to know what a reviewer has to provide feedback in a way. Somebody had said that if you start thinking like a reviewer, then it helps you also to structure your proposal so that it makes it easier for a reviewer to write the reviews, right? Because ultimately, if you write a proposal which is too complicated and things like that, it becomes hard. It takes a reviewer a lot more time to understand, and usually, people get frustrated, and so they are not really happy. So what I'll do here is to give you a perspective of what are the various sections that the reviewers have to fill in. So the first section there is the applicant. The reviewers have to write there how you are as an applicant in terms of your CV, previous track record in this area, then your letters of support. And this is very important, especially for intermediate fellowships, right? Because at this point, you're coming in with a not significant amount of preliminary data. You're just establishing your setup. So what you've done previously is important. Okay, it's not to say that you can change what your past, but it is important, and it's what it is. But you should sometimes good letters of support, if there were any deficiencies or something that you think that needs to be addressed, you should talk to the people who write the letters of support and make sure that they address some of those deficiencies, because this is, again, as I said, you cannot change your past, but at least if there are places which you want to explain or provide an explanation, that's what letters of support would be. The second part is the research question, is the significance. Again, Wellcome Trust DBT India Alliance program funds biomedical research. So you have to think about the significance, and the significance, it's not is not necessarily whether this research is feasible or not, but if what you are proposing it works out, then how is it going to transform our understanding of the field? Okay, so this is really what you need to think about in terms of the significance of the proposal. How so? If it is about human health then you have to make that connection. So think about and usually we find that the significance portion, most people do pretty well. They do quite well in terms of providing the significance. But sometimes if you are more in the physical sciences background and you are trying to connect it up to biomedical research, that's sometimes you need to really think about this a little more. The third thing is the research proposal, the approach section. Okay, what you are proposing and what you are how you are framing the question, etc. So here, I think one thing that you have to realize as scientists, for us, the grant funding and getting grants funded is the basic bare minimum that we need to succeed. Okay, because if you don't have grants, we cannot move forward. So while India Alliance likes exciting proposals, you have to be careful that you are putting forward something which is feasible and also cutting edge. Okay, I think sometimes we get carried away and you try to propose something which is really novel. Okay, something that is so cutting edge that you are the first person to do it. And the problem with that is that you need that there inevitably there's a ton of pushback from the reviewers saying that this is not feasible or this is not done. If your ideas are too radical out of the field, reviewers tend to come back saying that this is really not feasible, this person doesn't know what they're doing, and that can really hurt your chances, especially at those initial rounds, right? And if multiple reviewers say it, even though you might have the most convincing answers, but the thing is you cannot get to the next step of being called for the interview. So I would say that if you have really very exciting ideas which you have no proof of, right, or you have very limited proof of, just keep that away. What you need to focus on is something that is somewhat feasible, cutting edge, that will actually you will be able to get something out of it or publish something out of it. And I think that's kind of important to think about, because otherwise there is a chance that the reviewers, especially reviewers in the field, will provide a very strong push critiques that will kind of make it hard for us to even because we are somewhat of a we may not have panelists in the committee who is exactly in your field, so we have a somewhat outside perspective, and we do have to respect sometimes what the reviewers are saying in your field. So I think that's important, and I can, if there are questions on this, we can clarify. So the research proposal is typically we are looking for something which is hypothesis driven, that is there is an interesting problem, but you have some ideas what might be the mechanism that is underlying this, and these are the set of steps that you are, or set of experiments or aims that you are proposing to do to address these questions. So then we ask for what are the strengths and weaknesses, what is the quality of the if there are preliminary data, then about your training and expertise. So that's another thing the reviewers are asked to rate you on, and the feasibility. So feasibility is sometimes you can provide preliminary data, which I think always strengthens the application. The problem sometimes can be is you need to be careful about the preliminary data, because preliminary data itself can get critiqued, right? If your preliminary data doesn't look like good solid data and the statistics are poor and things like that, that itself can get critiqued. So you need to be careful about the preliminary data, but if you have good preliminary data, it should be there. So that's kind of what we have on the research proposal. And then there is another section called time commitment, which is interesting because it varies quite a bit, and we have had applicants writing they would work 90 hours a week, and it's this is somewhat, even though you might be working 90 hours a week, reviewers find it hard to believe and they point it out. And so make sure, even if you work 90 hours a week, you don't write that, you write more reasonable numbers, right? So just be reasonable about the time commitment, as well as and you may have other commitments, right? You cannot be doing 100% of research. That's not realistic. So one needs to be take that into. Then we have some sections on data management and sharing, and then then grantsmanship. Yes, and so typically that's something which is again, if you check all of these boxes and then follow some of the great tips that was given by the earlier panelists, I think your grantsmanship will come through. But I think it is, as someone pointed out earlier here, that it is good to get your grants seen by people who are outside your field, your mentors in your department or in your institute, people who some of the senior people who have seen grants like that, and have them look at some of these and give you feedback. So that really helps with that. And if your grant is easy for someone who is slightly outside your field to understand, it will be easier for us to understand, easier for reviewers to understand too. Okay, and finally, at the interview level, as I was saying before, most of our questions at the interview level are initially driven by some of the critiques that were raised by the reviewers, primary reviewers in the field. But we also ask you about your environment and the feasibility of carrying out some of the research, etc. And it's a moment for you to connect with the committee members. And I cannot tell you how important that is, because we are humans in the end, and this opportunity for you to connect and talk to us is really important. And so the final thing I would like to add is, even though it seems like there's a lot of steps in this process, I would add that all of these, even at the end, if you get the proposal, that is, if you get funding, that is great. I mean, this is really the kind of the flexibility and the amount of the research funding is excellent for, and it provides a big career boost. But I would say that the process of going through all of these steps is also important, because it allows you to benchmark your research to the peers as well as some of the external people outside the country, and also the feedback that you get is important. I think it provides, I mean, in science we always have to at every step, we always have to compete. We have to compete for ideas, we have to compete for funding and things like that. And so if you are not successful, don't feel disheartened. I think there are other funding opportunities, of course, but I think going through the process is absolutely helpful. I mean, we don't have panelists who went through the process and did not get funding here, but I believe that this is helpful to them also. With that, I will stop and turn it back over, and I'm ready to answer any questions if they come up.
Thank you, Professor Baranchandra. We will move on to the question answer session. I will hand it over to my colleague Rajeshri and Madhavan for the question answer sessions.
Thank you, Aritri. So we have a couple of questions here. So the first question is, maybe Dr. Lipi can answer this question. Is it possible to apply for IA funding with 2 other active grants? And can we justify few overlaps in terms of approaches across already active grants and the proposal?
Right. So if you mean DST or other Indian agencies grants, yes, it is possible. However, you will have to provide all the details about the research project and how much percentage of overlap it is with your proposed research. And I would advise to have 0% of overlap, because if you have an existing, like for example, I had a DST Early Career Award, and at that time I also had one more which was almost towards the end. So I had to provide the abstract of both the proposals, and I had to provide the justification of what is the work proposed in those proposals which are running in the lab and almost towards a completion, and what is the percentage of overlap. So I think you can apply, but please make sure that you have sufficient ideas that are unique to the India Alliance research proposal. Yeah.
Thank you, Lipi. So we have another question here. So this is maybe Dr. Baranchandra can answer this one. So can we add, is it a good idea to add preliminary data to the proposal? And how does it benefit or affect the application evaluation?
Yeah, it always is. I would say it benefits, in most cases, it benefits the application to add preliminary data to support the feasibility of the proposal. But I would also say just be careful with your preliminary data and make sure that it is good quality. That is, that you don't generate a plot with single data points and not add statistics, for instance, or or if you have not done that, you should point it out in your figure legends that this is a single set of experiments and we need to establish that, so that you're showing to the reviewers that you are aware of the limitations of your preliminary data. So that's the other way to do it, and be clear, be upfront about it. So, but I would say it is always better to add preliminary data and than not to add anything. And the other place where preliminary data is useful is if your research that you're proposing is very different from what you've done in your postdoc, right? That is where the preliminary data becomes really important, because if you have already established something which you have done for your postdoc, and I'm talking about the intermediate fellowships because that's the bulk of the fellowships that we see. If your research is very related to what you've done in your postdoc and you are using some of that to that itself establishes can be as part of your preliminary data. But if your research is very different, you need to establish the feasibility, and or not need to, you need to think of the feasibility. Otherwise, the reviewers can come back and say, well, this is not really feasible for these reasons, etc.
Thank you, Baron, for the response. So we have just one more question here. I would request Madhavan to respond to this. So this is regarding the application process. So the question is, do candidates get the reviews prior to interview round?
Thanks, Rajshri. All applicants will be receiving the review feedback received from peer reviewers. However, it will be shared at the end of the competition after the interview stage. So once again, all peer reviews received on an application will be shared with the applicants. However, you'll have to wait for the competition to be completed before we can share. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, so there's another question related to the application process. So is it difficult to get ethical and biosafety clearance while applying for intermediate fellowship before joining the host institute, and are these approvals mandatory at the time of submission?
Thanks. Thanks again, Rajshri. The applicants need not submit ethics approvals at the time of application. These are required only if you are awarded the fellowship and before starting any of the animal or human experiments. So at the time of application, it is not required. You may provide if you already have access to, however, it's not a mandatory requirement.
So there is one person who has raised a hand. So I'll just unmute. So Kirtana Gautaman. So you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm a postgraduate and I'm working as a senior resident. So I'm interested in doing the fellowship. So what I will be coming under the early career fellowship, or I should do a PhD and then only I can apply for the Indian Alliance fellowship. So this was my concern.
Okay. Thank you, Kirtana, for that question. You can write to us at info@indiaalliance.org and we will provide you the information on eligibility.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, so with that, we come to an end of this session. I'm requesting Haritri to make the closing comments.
Okay, so we have come to the end of our webinar today. I hope that this had been a very fruitful webinar for all of the prospective applicants who had been a part of this session today. And you can always reach out to India Alliance for any further queries. I have typed the mail ID that where you can write to us and get clarification about eligibility, about remit, and just info@indiaalliance.org. And to all our panelists, especially our committee member, Professor Baran Chanda, and our two fellows, Varsha Singh and Lipi Tukran, we extend a warm thank you to all of you to take out the time and come and be a part of this webinar. And so with this, I'd also like to thank my colleagues, Somiya, Rajeshri, and Madhavan, to help us with this webinar. However, before closing, I just think there are two more questions, Rajeshri, if we will take it, or okay, fine. So since we have run out of time, unfortunately, we cannot take these questions. However, you please write to us on info@indiaalliance.org. We would be closing the session now. And thank you all for attending the session.